Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Crowd Chatter podcast. It has been a very long time since our last video was released. In fact, I believe it was actually at this point now being last year, or pretty close to it. So I've been very busy. I've had a lot of stuff that I've had to do, and so I have not been able to put out videos. And so I've been kind of busy with other stuff and things around, the home and whatever else. So I have not been able to get to this. But today I am finally back. The podcast is finally back. Of course, you cannot see me, limited resources, so I don't have the ability to, especially since I'm showing the whole screen here, I don't have the ability to get my face on there as well. But today is going to be a series that I did last year for college basketball, which I have not done a video for since I think preseason poll that I did. And so today I'm gonna go back to this series as it's been a very long time, and that is Bubble Watch. So if you guys have ever watched the videos last year, or if you didn't watch last year, if you've gone on ESPN before, I don't think they released it yet, but they have their own little like series that they'll do for like the last month-ish of the year, and they just call it Bubble Watch, and they'll kind of like list from every conference like what teams they think um, are blocks and are pretty good bets to go to the pretty good bets to go to the NCAA tournament, and then there's other teams that they say, then they'll have the teams that they think are have decent shots and are pretty good bets to get in, and then the teams are like right on the cut line, maybe in, maybe out. Who really knows? They're kind of teeter tottering that line. Of course, those are called the bubble teams, but we have so this is gonna be our first iteration. I was gonna do this last week, but again, as I've said earlier, I have been very busy, and so I have not been able to really get this stuff out. So today is going to be my first time going with some videos here. And so we're gonna start actually with the ACC. Now, the ACC this year has not honestly been that special. They obviously you got the Dukes and North Carolinas of the world, which ironically which of course are the only two teams from this conference who are going to actually be locks in the ACC. I think both of these teams are pretty good are very much going to be in the NCAA tournament when the tournament is to come. I am using like a somebody else's uh, thing here. So this is not done by me. Um, Credit to whoever put this whole thing together because holy crap, there's a lot of teams and they somehow put every single one of them on here. Really impressive. But Duke, North Carolina, these are obviously both going to be in the NCAA tournament. They both have just immense amounts of wins over great teams. I mean, they have the resumes for it. They are absolutely dominant basketball teams. Both of them have obviously taken some not so great looking L's, with both of them actually losing on the road to Georgia Tech of all teams. Um, and but both of them just outstanding records. North Carolina 18-4, Duke 16-5. Both of them with outstanding wins over outstanding teams. With Duke going in, they got a win over Michigan State. They beat Baylor. They have some other solid wins as well. They have one over Clemson. Virginia Tech's pretty good. So I mean, Duke has the resume for sure. I would say North Carolina's is probably a little bit better, as of course now they have beaten Duke. And they also have a win over Tennessee, which is better than anything Duke has, as well as a win over as well as a win over Oklahoma, which is another really good win for them. Along with obviously a Clemson win, as well as a win over NC State, who's okay. So I mean, North Carolina has a very good resume. They have a lot of really good wins, and that really pays off for the Tar Heels, who are, you know, they got a good team. I mean, North Carolina is very old. They're very experienced. I really like the Tar Heel team. They are very, very good. Obviously, I think any team can be had really on any given day this year, kind of like last year. But I really like North Carolina's squad. Even Duke's. Duke's is really good too. Both of these teams are pretty darn good. I think North Carolina might be a little bit better than the Blue Devils. Of course, their first matchup of two just happened this past Saturday with North Carolina taking it 93-84. Yeah, two very good teams, though, and as I said, they're definitely, to me, both very solid locks to find their way into the NCAA tournament. Next, we have the Big 12, which arguably might be the best conference in all of basketball. The Big 12 is just utterly packed with outstanding basketball teams, and it remains that way this year. And I'm going to go and start with the very first team that is going to be a lock on here. And yeah, I think this one probably is going to be pretty obvious. That's Kansas. Kansas is an unbelievably good team. They remain, I would say the force of the Big 12. I mean, out of the whole pack, I think Kansas is definitely the best one. I'll go with the next one here, but I like Kansas was my favorite to win the whole thing when I first when the before the season even started. I thought that Kansas to me was the top team, and to me, the best team in the league. I thought in the country, I think they were the team that was going to win it all. And right behind them, as you can see, is the Houston Cougars. And I really like Houston's team too. They had a rough game against Kansas, of course, also this past Saturday. They did not play well at all in that game. They just came out kind of flat. I really don't know what happened in that game to them. They just like I said, they really just did not come out playing. I mean, they play hard every game, but it looked like they weren't ready for the intensity that Kansas was going to bring, and they just kind of rolled over. It was not very wasn't a very inspiring performance by the Cougars, but I think they're a better team than what they showed, and they'll definitely play a lot better in the future. They do have another head-to-head with Kansas. They'll be at home for that game, so I think they'll have a much better showing in that one. Up next for the Big 12, we still have another lock for them in this conference, and we have another one even before after them, and that's Iowa State. And I feel like this team somehow always finds a way. You could argue, well, I'll get to that later, but I feel like this team always finds a way to somehow be good when nobody ever expects them to be anything but just a nobody. I mean, they always seem to find a way to have a good record, have a good season, and beat some good teams. I mean, they've beaten Houston this year, they've beaten TCU, they've beaten Kansas. I mean, they have unbelievably good wins, and they're one of those teams that you would never expect them to have that good of a season, and yet they somehow always do. Don't I don't know how it happens, but they always find a way to have a good season, even when you look at them and you go, yeah, this team's nothing special. You expect nothing out of them, and they almost always tend to deliver. So it seems to be another Iowa State like season where you expect nothing from them, and instead they end up delivering a pretty solid year so far. So I got Iowa State. Next is going to be the Baylor Bears. And I'll put them ahead of Iowa State just because they beat them this week. It is an older logo for Baylor. I don't know why they don't have the newer one. This is the only logo they have for Baylor. But but Baylor obviously almost every year ends up playing pretty doggone well. Ever since they got Scott Drew, they've been a force in the Big 12, and they remain to be that. The Baylor Bears are a devastating team, and I mean they have some solid playmakers. I don't think they'll win the championship, but Baylor's got themselves a good team, and I think it'll remain that way. Baylor's got some big time players, and that's a very good basketball team. Um, really good basketball team over there in Waco, Texas. Next, we go to the Big East, and the first one is blatantly obvious, I'm sure, to many people wherever they are. There it is, and that's UConn. UConn is the defending national champions this year, and I mean they're playing like it. This basketball team has not missed a step. I mean they are playing head and shoulders, I'd say, pretty much above everybody else. Their only two losses on the year are one to Seton Hall and one to the team right here in Kansas. I mean, that's it. They have won every single other game, and a lot of them haven't even been close. I mean, this team has been probably the most dominant, probably the most complete. I mean, they have looked the part of being number one for sure. And even that Kansas game, they only lost by four. So I mean, they have, I think, proved themselves to be, you know, the better team, the best team in the country. They've proved themselves to be, who they are, be number one. Uh, as I said, they look the part. That's really the big thing for UConn, and they have absolutely looked outstanding this season. Props to the UConn Huskies. I think they have a very legitimate chance of going back to the Final Four and possibly winning it again. Um, and next week for the Big East, we do have more from this conference. Next is the Marquette Golden Eagles. Moving up to number 7 this week. Marquette's got a very good team as well. They're I would say, kind of similar to last season. Maybe the only difference being that they no longer have Olivier Prosper. He has moved on to the NBA. But they still do have themselves Tyler Kolek, which is obviously the biggest part of their team, as he is an absolute playmaker for them. They have some other solid players as well, but their best player is Tyler Kolek. I mean, Igudaro is also a good player for them too, but their number one guy is Tyler Kolek, and to me, I don't think that's really much of a question. This is mostly a homegrown team. This is mostly a team that has been all Marquette pretty much all their careers. So I think this is a very well-rounded team. These guys have been playing together for a very long time. They know each other very well. The chemistry is very tight. Obviously, they had the you know, saddening upset to Michigan State in the tournament last year in the second round as the Spartans got the better of them. But I think this Marquette team is very good. They're continuing to be that this season. They've had a couple missteps, but these Marquette Golden Eagles are very good. And it seems, their early, shall we say, um, drought is now something of the past. And the next team that I'll consider as a lock, this one's kind of right on the fence, but I'd say that this team does have probably just enough wins to consider them a lock, and that's Creighton. They do need some more wins, I would say, to be like a really good lock. But I think if this is, and I'm saying locks for these teams. I only say that because these are teams that I believe that if the tournament were the idea with these teams is if the tournament were to happen today. Like if the tournament were to happen today, these teams would be in the tournament. Like, these are the teams that I would think if the tournament were to happen today, like, yeah, these teams are very much in no matter what. Like, there's no chance these teams miss. That's the idea um, behind the locks for me. It's like these teams I think are 100% in, no doubt about it. They're in the tournament regardless. If it were to happen today, obviously there's plenty more games that will take place, but ideally that is what I'm, going with when it comes to locks for conferences. Is they're in regardless of what happens afterward. That's what I'm trying to go for. Um, Next, we have the Big Ten. And the Big Ten, honestly, is not, in my opinion, very special. However, they do have a team that obviously has been utterly dominant, and that is the Purdue Boilermakers, once again having a fantastic season. And it's not really that surprising. I mean, when you have a guy who's like 7'4", 7'5", weighs like 320 pounds, yeah, I think you're going to have some pretty good games. You know what I'm saying? I think you're going to have a good time. You have somebody like that who just dwarfs everybody else. But, Purdue's backcourt is very inconsistent. And we've seen it at times in the Big Ten where they have mightily struggled to beat some teams. Northwestern specifically being one of them that nearly beat them twice. I mean, they took them to overtime in West Lafayette, and Purdue ended up prevailing. But in Northwestern, it went to overtime, and the Wildcats took it. Nebraska ended up destroying them pretty much at home. Of course, those are Purdue's only losses. But Purdue's backcourt needs to find consistency, and if it does, let me tell you, if Purdue does get some consistency with their backcourt and their backcourt players and Fletcher Lawyer and was it Ethan Morton, I think is the other, or Morton, I think it's Morton, Ethan Morton. Uh, Purdue's backcourt players, if they get consistency and they all get on the same page and they're like consistently delivering good games, yeah, I think this team could win the championship. But that backcourt consistency has to be there. There is no exception for that. Their backcourt has to find some sort of consistency. If it doesn't, it's going to be rough for them. But like I said, if they do find that consistency, I do think they're in a pretty good position uh, to go and take it all, to go and win the whole thing. Next in the Big Ten, there are like I said, I did say that the Big Ten is kind of weak this year, but there are some solid teams. Next, I'm gonna stick with them in front. I'm gonna go with Wisconsin here. The Badgers are having a strangely very good season. There was not much expectation for the Badgers to be much of that good at all. And instead, they have delivered a top 10 worthy season. They were just number 6 in the country before taking a loss to Nebraska and then, of course, losing at home this past Sunday and a closer one to Purdue. But Wisconsin has had a very good year, 16-6. Now they obviously dropped a little bit after the few losses. They went to number 11. But Wisconsin's got some really good wins. I mean, they got a win over Virginia, which is obviously very good. They beat Marquette. You go to the Big Ten, and they have some solid wins in the conference. I mean, they only lost one game in the whole entire month of January, which was at Penn State. But there was only one. But that was the only loss that Wisconsin had. They have swept Michigan State on the season, and like I said, those wins over Marquette and Virginia both will look very good in terms of non-conference wins. Uh, I like Wisconsin's resume. They got some very good wins out there. I think they're easily a lock to go into the tournament. Next in the Big Ten, I'm going with as a lock for the NCAA tournament. I'm going with Illinois. The Illini have also had a pretty darn good season. They're actually ranked number 10 currently in the polls. They're like the only other really good team in the Big Ten. Everybody else is just kind of floating around, just kind of on that, on that line of just ordinary. Um, but this is a pretty darn good Illinois team. They've played pretty well this year. They've kind of floated around between 10 and 14 since like early January. Now back to number 10. But Illinois has got a good team. I mean, they played pretty well. They had a solid-ish start to the year. They did lose to Marquette early on. They got a nice win against FAU. They have some decent wins within the actual conference. One of them being against Northwestern, who actually is a pretty good team. Actually, so is Nebraska. But I got Illinois here as a lock. I think if the tournament were to happen today, they definitely would be in. What seed? No idea. Probably a 4, and I'd say they're an upset candidate. But and I think, well, to most people, I'd think they'd probably say this is an upset candidate. But the Illini are a solid team. They got some good players. But again, we say this about some teams that like, oh, they're an upset candidate. Any of these teams really can, because you look at last year's tournament. I mean, nobody expected. I mean, Purdue last year, of course, they lost. They were the second 1 seed to lose to a 16. No one expected that to happen. I mean, did many people think Purdue was gonna win it all? No, probably not. In fact, I think I had them actually losing. Um, I had them losing. I think to. I might have had them losing to. I don't remember if I had them losing to Memphis or not last year. I might have had. I know I have. I probably had them losing to Duke. I know that because I had Duke Michigan State as my Elite Eight game. Yeah, that really worked out. Um, but no one expected Purdue to lose to Fairleigh Dickinson, and yet they did. You know, and do I think Purdue was, like I said, the greatest team? No, probably not. But they're certainly better than Fairleigh Dickinson. And it goes to show that any of these teams, even though they're locks, it doesn't mean that these teams are unstoppable. I mean, they're vulnerable. You can any of these teams can be had. Will it be easy? No. But none of these teams are like I said, none of these teams are unstoppable. All these teams can be had. It doesn't mean they will be, but they can be had. That's the point I'm trying to get across here. Now, after done with the Big Ten, we move on to the Pac-12. There's only really one team that's ever really good from the Pac-12, and that's Arizona. They've had some interesting losses, but they have some very good wins as well. One of those for Arizona being on the road at Duke, which is enormous for them. They also have a win against Michigan State. They beat Wisconsin. They beat Alabama. They did lose to FAU, which is unfortunate, but that's a pretty good team, of course. They also lost Purdue. Um, then they have the interesting conference losses to the Washington States and Stanfords of the world, and Oregon State too. Which you look at those L's and you're like, what the heck? How did they lose to those teams? But they did. Not that it makes any sense. But this is a very good Arizona team. They're well coached. They have a good roster with some good transfers coming in. They also still have Balo. And their big transfers being Caleb Love and Keishad Johnson, the big player for San Diego State last year, who started for them. So that's I don't remember how exactly I pronounce his name, but of course Caleb Love, everybody knows. You also got Jaden Bradley, transfer from Alabama. So they got solid players across the board. This is a good Arizona team. I think if the tournament were to happen today, they would easily be in. Next, we go to the SEC, which is having probably one of their best seasons, I would say. And starting with the first team from the SEC, is actually a team I think is a dark horse to win it all, and that's Tennessee. This is a very well coached team, and I think this team is kind of underrated because their offense isn't necessarily always there. The offense for Tennessee and really for Houston, this has been the same. Houston and Tennessee, I think, are very similar teams because both of these teams are typically very defensively oriented. They heavily rely on their defense. That's what they hang their hat on. Their defensive teams, you know, they love their defense, and that's what they count on. They count on their defense to win them basketball games, and it pretty much always does. Their defense really is the like considered really one of their better attributes. But really, the thing for both Tennessee and Houston in recent years has been their inability to score. They've lacked really an offensive presence, and for both of their teams, it has been absolutely killing them. But this year, Tennessee now actually has a player who has been unbelievable this year in terms of scoring, and that's Northern Colorado transfer Dalton Connect. The guy has been unbelievable for him, shooting near 40% from three. 48% from the field is just absolutely absurd, and he's averaging near 20 points a game. I mean, the guy has been outstanding. He's also like 6'6", 6'7", as a guard, which is just insanity. So Dalton Connect is an outstanding, just massive offensive boost for a Tennessee team that already plays very physical, plays tough defense. You also have Josiah Jordan James, who's still around, also a senior. You have Zakiya Ziegler, who's still around. He's a solid player, another guard. You also have Jonas Adu, who's still around. That's a big guy for Tennessee. Vescovy still is around as well, also a senior. Once again, you look at Tennessee, they have a very experienced team, and they have a lot of playmakers. I like this Tennessee team. In recent years, I've always been very anti-Tennessee, mostly because I have never liked their offense. I have watched their offense, and I'm like, this offense is pathetic. They can't score. I've always been an offensive guy. That's always been me, which is why I've never really liked Tennessee or Houston basketball because they both hang their hat on defense, and I watch them, and I always watch them, and I'm like, neither of these teams. When I'd always watch them, they never really scored, and I'm like, neither of these teams really can get points on the board. If they have a bad shooting night, you can play all the great defense you want. Guys are still going to eventually score. You can't stop them possession after possession. You're gonna have to get points on the board. And I never really liked the fact that neither one of them really had great offense, which is why I almost always picked them for early exits. But Tennessee now has an offensive presence. And it's not like the rest of their guys can't score. They obviously showed against Kentucky. Yeah, they can score. So I love this Tennessee team. I think this is a team that's even Houston too. I think Houston's got some better offensive guys now. Both of them have dramatically improved on the offensive end. Both of those teams, I think, are very capable of deep runs in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, a lot of teams can get hot, but I love these two teams. I think they're very good. I also think they're incredibly dangerous, and there'll be problems come tournament time. Next is a group of three. It's going to be very tough for me to choose. I'm just going to pick the one that comes, what was it, first? Which one comes first? Oh, actually, that one will come first. Um, Next, I'm going to put in Alabama. And early in the season, it did not look like Alabama would be anywhere close to a lock, but they have completely turned this season around. They had a very rough non-conference schedule. They took a loss to Ohio State, which is really not a good loss at all. as Ohio State has not really had that good of a season. They did beat Oregon. They lost to Clemson. And then they had a rough stretch where they had Purdue, Creighton, and Arizona and didn't beat any of them. But then they've gotten into the conference and they've dominated. In the SEC, they only have one conference loss, that being to Tennessee. And they've also absolutely obliterated South Carolina, who has gone on to have a fabulous season. Also beat Mississippi State on the road. They also have a win over a very good Auburn team who's been playing pretty well this year. They also have another win against Mississippi State, who they obliterated at home this time. This is a very good Alabama team. Just point blank, they are outstanding. I mean, this is still a very good team. This is still a team that still has Mark Sears, which is their big time transfer from Ohio a year ago, who more or less was a kind of like a secondary piece on that team that had Brandon Miller and everybody else. But this year, he's more been the focal point of the team, and he has run with it. I mean, he's shooting 44%, almost 45% from three, which is absolute insanity. And he's shooting 52% from the field, and that's on, at least 5 attempts a game from three and 12 from the field. So he's absolutely on fire, and that's unbelievable percentages, especially with those kinds of attempts. That's unbelievable percentages. Mark Sears having an unbelievable year, and like I said, averaging 20 points a game. He is the focal point of this Alabama team. Alabama's obviously very good. And I love where Alabama is. They have so many play. That's with that. And they're also well coached with having Mark Sears. This is a very good team. Uh, Alabama's very dangerous. Next, I'm gonna go with Kentucky. And they've been up and down. This is now Kentucky. Like I said, a lot of these teams, like Tennessee. I mentioned this also about North Carolina. Even Kansas is a decently experienced team. Kentucky is your atypical Kentucky team. They are very young. This team has a lot of true freshmen, and this team has had a lot of great games and has also had a lot of letdowns. Obviously, this past week was a bit of a letdown, losing at home to Florida in overtime and then losing to Tennessee. They did not have DJ Wagner for this past game, so obviously that did hurt them a little bit. But this Kentucky team is very young and they are very talented. This team has got a lot of really good players. Aaron Bradshaw has come back for Kentucky now, not from injury, and has been playing. Rob Dillingham has been very good for him this year. Another true freshman. Justin Edwards has been very good for this team as well, mostly a starter. All three of those guys, of which I just mentioned, all of them are freshmen. Reed Shepard has had a really good year for Kentucky. He's more of a bench piece, but he's been very good coming off the bench. Another freshman. DJ Wagner, obviously, is one of the bigger parts of the team. Another freshman. So that really tells you enough. This is a very young team. Pretty much everybody, except for like a couple pieces. They do have Trey Mitchell, who's been kind of a college journeyman, really. But he's a veteran, and he's had a solid year for them. They also have Antonio Reeves, which is very much a experienced player from. He's a fifth-year senior actually this year, and he's their best player. He's averaging near 20 points a game. Kentucky, really their biggest issue, as I look at really a lot of their scores. Um, they don't play defense. And I like I said earlier, I love offensive teams, But sometimes an offensive team, you get into a little bit of some trouble when you start getting into what Kentucky has been getting into seemingly every game, and that's track meets. I mean, this Kentucky team. I mean, I'm sure I can probably find it somewhere. They're giving up just absurd amounts of points every single game. I'm sure. In fact, let me take a look and see how many it is a game. I'm sure it's towards the top here. I just need to find it. Well, they're not worse than Michigan, so they have that much going for them. Um, but Kentucky, looking at a lot of their scores, yeah, they're giving up almost 80 points a game. So that's a problem. If you're giving up near 80, I mean, it's at 78. I mean, to be exact, it's 78.4. But if you're giving up 78.4 points a game, that means you're at least having to score 80 every single game. That's very tough. Like to be able to score that many points a game, that makes it very difficult. However, they are averaging near 90 points a game. So, pretty good obviously, but the defense for Kentucky needs to be better because really the offense isn't always going to be, firing on all cylinders. There's going to be some games where you're not at your best and you're going to have to count on your defense to bail you out, which is what Tennessee and Houston have going for them is their great defenses. Bail them out. They're having a rough day. Kentucky right now doesn't really have that because they haven't really done that as much. I'll put Kentucky. Oh no, I'll leave them there. But Kentucky, really good season for them. I like their team. They're kind of a dark horse pick for me. Uh, Obviously with their freshmen, it's just a matter of them being consistent because they look like they're the part, and then sometimes they don't look like they're the part. So it's a matter of Kentucky being consistent, but that's a very good basketball team. And then the next one is going to be a complete wild card because I don't think because there's absolutely no one who would have expected this team to even be anywhere close to where they are right now. And this is where we find them. And we're going to actually go. I don't even know where they are on here because I've never had to put them on there. There they are. South Carolina. They're a lock. I mean, they have been that good this season. And South Carolina, I'm putting them there. South Carolina currently this year, they have, and this is not, and it's unbelievable to me. They're 19-3. I mean, they're 19-3 this year, and they've beaten both Kentucky and Tennessee. This South Carolina team has played very well. I watched them a little bit against that Tennessee team, and they're playing pretty well. And I mean, I don't know anybody honestly for this South Carolina team. I mean, I would never have paid attention until unless I had figured out they were actually playing this well and doing this good. But that's what they're doing, and they're the number one defense in the SEC. Giving up only about 63 points a game, which is honestly pretty good. And they're scoring about 72, which is pretty good as well. Um, and this South Carolina team, I mean, they just jumped into the rankings this week, jumping to 15 with wins over Tennessee. They beat somebody else, but I think it was Tennessee, namely, that really got them there. Yeah, the Tennessee win, which was on the road, mind you. They beat Tennessee in Knoxville, which is very difficult to do. Very impressive win for the Gamecocks. And yeah, unbelievable year for them. This team was picked last in the SEC, picked as to be last in the SEC this year during the preseason, and now they're in the they're in the conversation for being the regular season champions. Let alone they're a lock right now. So unbelievable year for South Carolina. Really impressive. And then next, others is like just anything that isn't a Power Six conference. It's supposed to be Power Five because the Pac-12 is going to just completely disappear, sadly. And the only other team that really I think has a lot as a lock is FAU. And Florida Atlantic has been having a very good season. I mean, last year they kind of came out of absolutely nowhere and completely dominated. But really, this year, FAU, I mean, they have some really strange looking losses, but they also have some really good looking wins. So it's kind of like a balancing act because they have some very strange losses to Florida Gulf Coast, Bryant, as well as Charlotte, who's really not that good of a team either. They actually are actually they're not that bad, but that's still not a good loss if you're FAU. So they have some weird losses like those, but they also beat Butler, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, as well as Arizona. So they have some very good wins too. Of course, mean in the American, which really the only good team is Memphis, who has been all over the place this year. Um, FAU doesn't really have a lot of great opportunities to get good wins, and they don't even play Memphis until the end of February, which, like I said, oh, actually, they play them twice, but their first game against them is at the end of February, which, as I said earlier, is pretty much the only other good team in the American, maybe SMU, which also isn't until the end of February. But really, other than that, there's not really a ton of great teams in the American Conference for this FAU team. So really, they gotta be like on their best behavior. They can't lose any games, otherwise, it's like, yeah, that puts you in a kind of precarious spot because, well, that's a team that most teams will be able to beat, and if you can't beat them, then that is problematic. But that's the curse of being in a smaller conference like the American, which is what Houston was in until they moved to the Big 12 this year. But that's it for the locks. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. These will probably go a lot faster now that I'm not, making the whole list and having to go through every team, because probably in the next few weeks, once I actually get to those, I'll just have this already ready. And if I want to really take somebody out, I'll take them out. Or if it's pretty obvious that they should stay where they are, that's are going to stay right there. So it'll be a lot different probably in the coming weeks. How much different this is going to be. It'll be probably a lot quicker, is my point. So that's it for this video, though. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. So until then, adios, everyone.